What's up, everybody? Sixers training camp is underway right now. We've got the great Sean Barnard down below here. We're going to talk some Sixers. We also obviously got to get into that Tua situation from last night, and we'll be giving our final Eagles keys to victory and predictions here. Trending in the AM starts in 30 seconds.
Holding gets around in front. Joel Embiid,
and Philadelphia has it.
And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Trending in the AM right here on DSM Media. Live as always on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. You know the drill. Like, share, retweet, and follow. And if you're watching on the YouTube page, make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button. Drop your comments on the comments section there. Best way to get interactive with the show. Well, we got lots of topics to cover today. It helps us build the algorithm as well. Guys, we got the great Sean Barnard down here, Jason. Sean Barnard from Heavy on Sports. Yardbark. You cover the Sixers for Heavy on Sports. Eagles for Yardbarker. And obviously, you got a great podcast, Pick Swap podcast. Good morning, Sean. How you doing today?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you guys for having me on. It's exciting. I'm happy to have basketball back a little bit. Sixers are back. Eagles are on top of the world. So times are good in the world of Philadelphia right now.
Well, minus the Phillies, right?
Yeah, very fair, very fair.
Jason, you've been begging me not to talk Phillies all week long. So you're going to get your wish. We are not going to talk Phillies, Jason, one bit today.
Thank you.
Look at the relief that just came off his face.
I don't feel like having to go off again.
Yeah. No, dude, I just can't wait to talk Phillies another time and just tell everybody how right I was about this team all year long since the beginning of the season. But anyway, let's forget about that. Obviously, guys, we got to talk a little Tua. Sean, I got a little bit of your time today. I want to get your thoughts on the Tua situation as well, because that was just awful last night. But we got you on here because Sixers. You know, you cover the Sixers. You do a great podcast. You do great work over there covering them. Training camps now. We're about the first week of camp is through here, and the first thing I want to talk to you about is something that I've seen come out. I'm sure you've seen the clips and the videos of Glenn. Just so you know, I call him Glenn. We do not call him Doc. He lost the title of Doc on this show. Glenn talking with Tyrese and James Harden a lot in those clips about both of them being more aggressive, demanding the ball, wanting the ball, and getting it where they want it. What are your thoughts on Glenn Rivers and what he's trying to do with that backcourt of Tyrese Maxey and James Harden?
Yeah, I loved it. The clip with Harden especially, I thought was very cool to see, kind of like a peek behind the curtain, see him breaking down. I really like the way he just kind of like conversationally went through it with Harden, talked about what he wanted and why, broke it down in that way. And like, I'm very excited for what can be. I think he's absolutely right. And like everything he said about the pecking order, how he said it's not a democracy. Like we got to get you and James, everyone, or you and Joel, everybody else will follow. And that kind of mindset I really like. I think people forget, like, James Harden only played 21 games with the Sixers before the playoffs last year. It takes time for an offense to fully gel, and that's what they're like trying to work through in training camp. So I think this is a team that like the pieces are kind of finally put together, and it's on Glenn Rivers to put it in place. So
it takes a lot of training not to say Doc. It takes a lot of effort not to do it.
Yeah.
So I just, right before the show, I had a specific like line of questioning, but right before we started the show here, I was paging through Twitter and I saw a tweet. I forget who shared it out, but it was a quote from Bob Cooney talking about from who he heard in the Sixers organization and how healthy, James Harden looks right now. And I said it a few days ago on the show when we were talking, me and Dylan Davis were talking Sixers. And I talked about how, I think James Harden can have an MVP caliber season still averaging 20 or 21 points, but just being this distributor. But from the Bob Cooney quote that I just read, that people inside the Sixers organization think that we might get throwback James Harden this year, 25, 26 points a game, 13 plus assists. Just talk about what that would mean to the Sixers and the NBA as a whole if all of a sudden old school James Harden is back.
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question about the ceiling with the Sixers team is what exactly is still left in the tank with James Harden. I think like the contract talks, we obviously know he opted out of the player option, kind of signed basically a 1-year deal with an insurance going into this year, and it has his eyes kind of on a max in the future is what I believe the process is. And for some people, that's like kind of a red flag negative. For me, I'm kind of taking it as like he believes he has more in the tank and wants to prove it this year. I like the aspect of seeing this guy with his back against the wall, ready to prove it. It's been many years since that's had to be the case, and I think he is coming in determined. I'm not as bought into the hype about the body as I think some people are. But the bottom line is we don't need the throwback full James Harden. I don't think we're gonna fully get that, but there's gonna be nights where he can be the third best member of the Sixers and they still win games. So it would be obviously great if we can see like the best version of James Harden. We saw like the pick and roll with Joel was so deadly in the brief amount of time that it was there. Building off that, if there's just a little bit more creation, a little bit more just burst and getting by guys, one-on-one isolation ability, that's what the Sixers are looking for, and that's really all it is. So the version of James Harden that shows up is very drastically alters what the ceiling of the Sixers team are. So that's kind of the question we're all looking to see.
Yeah, Jason, I was trying to find, I know basketball, you're getting more into basketball. You did at the end of last season doing this show. So I've been trying for the last couple of days, knowing this conversation was coming, and I haven't been able to figure it out. I'm trying to compare James Harden to either a football player or a baseball player or a hockey player, someone that started to slow down, like a superstar trying to slow down. Then all of a sudden, all the hype is that they're healthier, they're in better shape, and the expectation is that they're just gonna go back to old school, way of doing it. Jason, can you remember any athletes? Because to me, like last year at the end of the year with the Sixers and James Harden, he couldn't play through contact. He couldn't get to the rim like he used to. And we're all just supposed to assume that he lost 100 pounds or whatever the joke was he made, and he's going to be able to barrel through it. Jason, can you remember any athletes that we thought hit a wall and then all of a sudden, proved that they hadn't hit a wall? They just got in better shape and became a superstar again? Because I can't think of anybody like that.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think across all sports, but I guess a guy in hockey that I could probably compare him to, as far as like superstar level, is a guy like Steven Stamkos from Tampa Bay Lightning. Like Steven Stamkos, much older, started to slow down, and then you saw what he did last year. Like he put up almost MVP numbers. Like obviously that team has a bunch of superstars, so it's hard to tell. But I'm just saying, to me, with James Harden, like I look at it as I'm not a guy that's going to bet against it because a lot of people are just assuming that he can't go back to James Harden of old. But I watch LeBron James. Now, listen, I know he's not LeBron James. LeBron James is a top 5 player, but James Harden has been a top 10 player in this league for a while, right? So is there that much of a drop off from a top 5 to a top 10 guy as far as your body slowing down? I mean, I don't think you can sit there and necessarily say, oh, the guy's just not going to be able to perform that way. I think it does depend on health. And I think last year, if you watch James Harden, I thought at least that the injury was a little more serious than anybody was letting on, and even himself. Like, I think he tried to play through it and like act like he, it didn't bother him, but it obviously bothered his play on the court. And, to Sean's point, he only played 20 some games before the playoffs with the Sixers. So I think this year, I mean, you talked about it 35 times on training last year about how, teams need players to gel. They need time. And it's important to have that full kind of almost full season of roster before you're going to go into a playoffs. You have to have that. And I think this year you're going to get it. I do. I really believe it.
So, Sean, on that part, have we put too much pressure on James Harden having to be able to get through contact and whatnot? Everything that basically I just talked with Jason, are we putting too much pressure, or is it, should we expect it from James Harden?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's too much pressure at all. This is a guy who has lived up to the pressure in the past. Like, he's been the 1A grade 1 guy for the majority of his career, for his entire Rockets tenure. And I think, like, there is an aspect of people forgetting, like, how cold James Harden was at one point in his career and, like, the hope that that's still in there. I also think another reason for optimism is, like, looking at him is he's a guy who's, when he's locked in, he's, like, fully there, plays well, committed, plays hard. When he's not, he kind of drifts off. And we saw that with the first half of the year with the Nets last year. He obviously was checked out, didn't want to be there. And I think he kind of let himself go as a result of that. When he got to Philly, I do believe he was locked in, cared last year, as I think he is right now. But I don't think his body was able to like just snap back into like prime mode like it has in all those years in the past. So I think like having an offseason to fully work on this, be dedicated to that, there's reason for optimism. And the track record isn't awesome for guys bouncing back when they hit this stage of their career. But I don't think there's too much pressure on him at all. And him like just playing within his role and at times just being the playmaker he talks so much about is going to be fine, even though we're looking for a little scoring burst too.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. Sixers fan 22, stat line for James Harden. I kind of think our answers can kind of lead into the next topic. I don't think James Harden needs to average 25 points and whatnot, or 26 points a game. He doesn't need to average the points that he used to. But I also said, Sean, and I'd love to get your thought on this. You know, I said this on Wednesday with Dylan when we were doing the show, or Tuesday, that I think you're going to see Joel Embiid come down to about 25 points a game. He's not going to try to be that super dominant scorer anymore because he doesn't have to with this big three, big four we have here. I think you're going to see 25 from Embiid, 20-21 from Tyrese Maxey, 20-22 from James Harden. You're going to have three guys in that 21 to 25 point per game average. Is the emergence of James or Tyrese Maxey, and I guess to an extent, Joel Embiid more focused on the defensive side, you know, is that, you know, the three of them, is one going to just dominate like last year with Joel Embiid at 30 points a game, or is it just going to be a team effort between the three of them?
Yeah, no, I think we're going to see more of a team effort this year. The entire message coming out of camp has been defense and how important that is. We obviously have seen what Joel can do offensively, led the league in scoring last year, just a terrific talent on that end. But I think there's a world where his most impactful version of the game is taking a little bit of offensive load off. He was second in the NBA in usage last year and really locking in defensively, being a guy who takes that serious. Because we see like the moments where he kind of floats through the games and doesn't go every possession defensively, which he needs to do based on how much is on his plate. But when he gets to like the fourth quarter, you see him fully lock in, and the Sixers defense looks completely different. So if he can be like that, like start to finish in a game, I think there's a ton of reason for optimism. And the Sixers have like put up enough new weapons to like have a chance to take some load off his plate. So I could see that being that happening, him taking a little bit of a step back in the scoring department, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
So I know that all the talk keeps coming around of, you know, him and defense and his focus. You brought it up. You know, he said, look, want to do it, you know, all four quarters, not just in the fourth quarter. And I was joking the other day about how he knows he can't win MVP. The league won't give him the MVP for some reason. 2 years in a row. Literally the first center since Shaquille O'Neal to average over 30 points a game. And he still couldn't get the MVP award. If he takes it, wouldn't it be kind of ironic, guys, if he took a step back offensively, just because he was so motivated by defense, that they give him the MVP award this year because he has defensive player of the year style, like, or game, still is going to throw up 25 points a game and lead this team. Wouldn't it be kind of crazy to think that him focused more on defense gets him that MVP trophy?
Yeah, I think there's a chance of it. Like, I think that could be the case. He's obviously going to be in the running again. It's really frustrating what happened last year, especially because we don't always see this with athletes, but like Embiid was a guy who really did care about that award. Like he was pretty public about like his desire for it, him competing for it, which I think is cool. Like we just don't see that a lot. And guys like obviously want to win the award. Like not that that's everything, but that they want to be recognized for their strong play. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I could see that happening. There's a little part of me that would be like somewhat disappointed if it's like after like the historic season that he had last year and just how impressive he was to kind of give him a handout. But who knows? He might even just take things to another level this year and earn it completely.
Jason, we've seen it in a lot of sports. Sometimes players get like the token MVP trophy a little later in their careers, right? I'm forgetting who. I know somebody in baseball got a token MVP award a few years back. I can't remember who. But, you know, Joel Embiid defensively, if he's committed every single quarter of every game that he plays, I kind of feel like that will also preserve him as an NBA player. Because obviously, I kind of feel like the way he plays on offense versus the way he plays on defense, offensively, the way he plays beats up his body a lot. As a 7'2", 285-pound guy, the way he plays defense He's not flopping and falling on the ground. He's not, driving into – he's not taking big hits as much on defense. So I kind of feel like a more aggressive defensive Joel Embiid is better big picture for this team because it's also going to come playoff time give us a more healthy, more energized Joel Embiid. Is that kind of a good thought process that I'm on there?
Yeah, definitely. And to Embiid's credit, I think he's gone a long way of improving offensively in a way that isn't as damaging to his body. We've seen him come out more on the perimeter, be more comfortable creating and handling the ball on his own rather than just like banging in the post and doing all that. Mid-range jumpers, he was one of the best in the league from percentage-wise from there last year. So he's done some things to make the offensive load not as just physically draining on him, which has been a positive. And defensively, the times that I will say do concern me is he still sometimes has a tendency to like come over for a reckless like help side block and lay out with that regard. So those are the ones I definitely would like to see him cut out of his game a little bit, especially in the regular season. But like to your point, yeah, absolutely. If he can just like be like more focused on the defensive end and not as like just more physically draining on his body is more how I look at it. Like he's such a massive human being that the amount that he moves and works and lays out and everything, like I don't like the rep of him like being too, I don't know, fragile or whatever, just because like it's tough what goes on in his body. So I hope that's the case.
Yeah. I think the whole injury prone thing for him is a little overblown because
Definitely.
a lot of his injuries come from him being overly aggressive, and like his hand injury last year or the knee injury. I mean, it's just an aggressive type thing that when you're 7'2", 280, I'm a big guy at 6'2", 220. I can't imagine adding another 12 inches to me and 80 pounds. I just couldn't imagine what that would feel like on a body.
Yeah, and it's not like he's picking up like injuries that would indicate that he's like out of shape or whatever. Like he's not pulling a muscle every time. He's not doing like stuff like that. It's all just like weird things, like getting hit in the face. He's broken his face like 3 times already in his career, which is crazy. So there's a lot of freakish stuff that happens, and based on like how much guys sit now, Embiid is right above, like even a little bit above the curve as far as games played. I think he's done a far part to smash the injury prone label, but he's definitely not a guy that's soft by any means. He plays through as much as he can.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jason, we've talked all off season about all the moves that this team's made, the PJ Tuckers, the Meltons, the Houses, all the different players that this team has brought in. But there's one consistent, Jason, and you know it. My favorite guy on the team, Glenn Rivers, is still here, and he's still running the team. Last year, Jason, or before this season with baseball, I said the problem with the Phillies last year to this year, you still had Joe Girardi. We saw that how that didn't work out. Are you, Jason, concerned, and then Sean will get you, that Glenn Rivers, I mean, you guys know, I'm not a fan of Glenn Rivers. I thought it was time to move on. He is still here. Do you have confidence that Glenn Rivers can get this team together, guys?
I mean, you know where I stand. I've been a big critic of can I say Doc on the show?
You can say it. I cannot say it. I have banned the word from my mouth.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of Doc, but to his credit, I will say I think Doc does do a very good job as far as developing players. I mean, I look at a guy like Tyrese Maxey, who I loved coming out of college. I mean, I as you know, I'm just starting to get more into basketball. I've never been a huge fan, but I'm starting to learn more about the game. And obviously, Tyrese Maxey's quickly become my favorite player. And it's easy to have him as your favorite player because he's just first of all, he's a great guy. Secondly, he just has that high energy, which I love. Like, I love a guy that, I mean, obviously, growing up, AI was my favorite player. So, obviously, Allen Iverson. And I just look at what Doc does with young guys, and I think you can't. If you're going to bash the guy, you have to give him credit for the wins. And he's definitely done a tremendous job acclimating, a guy of Tyrese Maxey's stature into his lineup. And I think Tyrese Maxey's ceiling is kind of like moving as we go. Like, I never really thought that Tyrese Maxey in the beginning was going to be a superstar. I do now. I actually absolutely believe he will be a superstar. And I think he's already on his way there. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he's doing it at such a young age, it just bodes well for the future of this team. What I will say with Doc Rivers, I'm curious how he's going to acclimate these new guys into the lineup. Is he going to play? Is he going to kind of do as he says, as opposed to saying things and then going away from it? We've talked about that, how he we get frustrated about how he has like the same lineup in there and he never like has guys like, different lineups that if a lineup's not working, if he doesn't go to another one or, I know you were highly critical in the playoffs of the, the pairings, when it comes down to it. And that's kind of the stuff that I look at with him it makes you shake your head. Like, it's like, does he not have a pulse? Does he not realize what's going on in the room? And so, yeah,
Glenn Rivers is a stubborn veteran coach. He's got that title, under his belt already with Boston. So he kind of feels like he knows better than everybody else. Sean, will Glenn be able to change my mind this year with all these new additions?
Yeah, I won't act like I'm the number one Doc Rivers supporter and say like that he's perfect and everything. The thing I will say is like he hasn't earned a way out of town yet when you look at like what's been done. Like obviously his first year with the playoffs, it was the Ben Simmons blow up. Looking at last year, like Ben Simmons held out for the entire last year. Like it's very difficult circumstances that he was in. And even if Embiid doesn't take that like broken face, we're probably getting by the Heat in the second round and probably advancing there. And to Doc's credit, I thought he did some like it took a full town mutiny, but he did end up pulling like the right decision as far as B-ball Paul over DeAndre Jordan and stuff like that. So I think there's been stuff that like he absolutely is very stubborn. And I think his biggest like negative and where he comes off the worst is his handling of the media more so than his actual players. I think he comes off and gives a bad tune there that like lingers for sure. But as far as like the on-court stuff, there's going to be a ton of pressure on him this year as well. He now like has the tools top to bottom and like it's on him to put them together. The Montrezl Harrell signing, I think, is the clearest like indication of it. Like you look at the addition in itself, there's two different things. Montrezl in himself absolutely makes the Sixers team better. That's a terrific signing, terrific value, a flavor of player the Sixers team has not had, and I'm very excited to see him on the court. But there's just that like voice in the back of your head being like Doc literally 3 years ago played this guy way too much in the playoffs, and it cost his team a championship, or it cost him team out of the playoffs, cost them a 3-1 lead over the Nuggets. So it's like literally the same player, and that's kind of in your head. So like in the shell, it's like this is a great move, makes the team better, but in the back of your head, you're like, but am I just kind of letting us shoot ourselves in the foot in the end? So it's that kind of thing that you're worried about.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how he uses Harrell and how he uses PJ Tucker. Will PJ Tucker come off the bench, which is what I think he should do at first. And honestly, those two moves are great, but it's not even my favorite two moves of the all season because Anthony Melton, to me, is the best move. I mean, first off, just the trade itself, the value they got there was insane. But to have a guy like him, I don't know about. I know that I've tweeted it 100 times. My favorite move of the all season, but for people that haven't watched Memphis basketball regularly, I mean, we're getting a guy that's going to be right there with Tyrese Maxey as fan favorite type of player, and he's so young. I mean, I'm really curious to see how he integrates into the rotation, into the minute structure, the Melton, the Tucker, and the Harrell, because there are three guys that can. You just think about it, those are going to be their first three guys off the bench. Who were the first three guys off the bench last year? Furkan Korkmaz, Shake Milton, you know, George Niang. The difference between the three guys coming off the bench this year versus the first three last year, it's night and day.
Yeah, think about Shake Milton was the sixth man in this team like very recently, and he is still on the roster and not even really in the mix for like the top spot off the bench, which is just like such a great indication of how much the team around him has improved, and that's awesome. D'Anthony Melton's terrific too, and he's a guy that like he's just like a type of player that they haven't had, like the athleticism he brings, 6'9" wingspan on a 6'2" body, freakish jump. He's a guy that will go up and put it on somebody's head like. That the Sixers just haven't had that. So I agree. I think he's going to be a fan favorite as well. And he's a nice, like, defensive complement to Maxey and Harden, who are both a little bit deficient on that side of the floor. So a good guy to be able to throw in there.
Yeah, the defensive battles or talk coming out of camp between Melton and Tyrese, and how one stole the college defensive player award from the other and all. And I love to see that rivalry and competition going on in camp. I just totally lost my mind just went completely blank. completely. Okay, Matisse. I said Matisse. That's what I was talking about. There's been a lot of rumors and talk. Is this team complete or not? I see this as complete of a team as it is right now. I don't see Daryl Morey making any more moves anytime, anywhere soon. Matisse, he's a trade chip at this point, but that's being saved for the trade deadline or later in the season once we see what we have. Sean, do you agree that there's no other major moves coming? I know Crowder has been bounced around a lot lately. I don't think any more moves need to be made at this point.
Yeah, I'm not going to fully rule it out. I think, like, for the most part, Morey's going to want to actually see this team on the court before he decides, like, what if it needs to be a final piece, if there's something missing, and move it. The thing I will say about Matisse, there's been a lot of Matisse hype coming out of praise just about how much he's been in the gym, how much, to me, like, reading between the lines, it feels like, oh, let's boost this guy's value as much as we possibly can. I personally feel about Matisse, I think he, like, can't be a guy in a playoff rotation. I think his offensive deficiencies are too large on that stage. And we talk so much, like, following the Ben Simmons stuff about, like, how much the spacing changes when he's off the court and providing Embiid with that. I feel similarly about Matisse, except, like, he doesn't bring the rebounding, the ball handling, or the passing that Simmons does. So, like, I respect what he does defensively, but it's also, like, there's so many flaws there that worry me. And the thing about holding him on to the deadline is he's going into the final year of his contract. And I don't think there's any team that, like, looks at Matisse as, like, the final piece to their puzzle, which is essentially what you would be looking for in a trade if you're trading for a guy with 6 months left on their contract and going for a playoff push. So I do see some logic to making a trade now, trying to flip him and whatever for something. And they also still have 17 guys for 15 roster spots. So a deal like Matisse and maybe Matisse, Furkan, and a young guy for another veteran is something I could see happening.
Come on now. Furkan is the leader, the toughness leader on this team now. The only guy that can take on an entire country's police force 1-on-20 and beat them up. Come on.
I know, that might have made him untradeable in my mind.
That may have made him the most popular guy in Philly, taking on a whole entire police force. Sean, I don't know how much time we've got with you. I never actually asked how much time you've got this morning. So if you got to go at any point, just let me know. Real quick before we move on, because I want to get your opinions on Tua, and I want to get Jason on the Tua situation here. What is the ceiling? Can this Sixers team, guys, win an NBA title as it is right now?
Yeah, I think so. The ceiling is absolutely a championship. They have the tools, they have the pieces. It's about putting them together. It's going to be a little bit of a work in progress, but, like, I think this is top to bottom the most complete team we've seen in the Joel Embiid era.
Jason, so the ceiling is, I saw you shaking your head. Yes, it is a title, is the ceiling capable, but what is the minimum that this team has to have this year success wise that the fans, the organization, Joel Embiid will not be disappointed?
I mean, we've talked about it that a lot of times teams, in order to win championships, a lot of things need to go your way. Mm-hmm. I do think that the East has become the stronger side of the conferences as far as the West, East, that
it's deeper.
That goes. So it will be, the road will be tough, but they do have a roster that's capable of winning it. Obviously, everything a lot of times hinges on injuries, guys, or injuries on other teams. Like, I think the Sixers need to, for me to be able to say that it was a success, they need to get to the conference finals. They have to at least get to a conference final. They have to. Because they've already been to a second round, and lost. They need to at least get to the final, conference finals. I would love to see them make the finals, and even if they were to lose, it gives them that, like, extra confidence for the following year. Like, you always see teams that are building, usually, like, on slow builds, like, they'll make the play. First year they don't make the playoffs. Second year they make the first round, then the second round, then they kind of progress. So you definitely want to see that progression, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. I think even if they go out in the second round to just for hypothetical sake, they face Milwaukee in the second round, Milwaukee beats them and goes on and wins the NBA title. It doesn't matter that you just lost the champions. Not getting out of the second round would be a major disappointment, no matter what the situation, health-wise or anything. So a conference finals is an absolute must. So there is that pressure, so to say, on this team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, guys, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you guys nailed that. I agree with that as well. This is 5 straight years where we've kind of just been stuck on that second round plateau with getting swept by the Celtics in the middle there in the first round as well. So yeah, they just got to find a way to get farther than that, get deeper in the playoffs, and I think that's like the bar for what we considered like a step forward. So let's see it happen.
All right, guys, let's get into something else here. I'm sure you guys have all seen it now. Last night, Tua, Miami Dolphins quarterback, took a vicious hit. And, Jason, I think some of our most deep shows that we've done in the almost year we've done trending in the AM have come when we've talked Miami Dolphins controversies. We spent 2 episodes in a row talking the Brian Flores situation. And here we are back with the Miami Dolphins again, another controversial situation. Obviously, Tua took the big hit on Sunday. It was his back that bothered him, supposedly, and nothing else. And he was out there again last night. He took the hit. Obviously, it was vicious. You saw the hands convulsing. My other guy, Jason, from my golf podcast, guys, he sent me a message with a picture of like a description of what that, like, basically it's a brain injury causes your hands and your muscles to do it. I can't find the exact, wording right now, but guys, should the Dolphins be getting investigated for what they did and how they've handled this Tua situation? Sean?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked and answers that I don't think that they're going to be happy with the results of. Like, dating back to Sunday, I know it's labeled a back injury, ankle, whatever. Like, you just watch that clip of him, like, falling down. It's like, if this is a boxing match, that's like a wave it off, like it's over kind of moment. And to see him, like, go back in that football game and play 4 days later is crazy. And obviously, like, a terrible look for the NFL all around. They're going to stick to the past concussion protocol. Wasn't in it on Sunday. But, like, I just, like, there's something that just doesn't add up with this. And I think, like, the fact of him, like, it felt like a step back in player safety last night. And it was frustrating to see, heartbreaking to see. Prayers up for Tua. He apparently traveled home with the team last night after going to the trauma center, which is a good sign there. But I don't know. These are, for this kind of stuff, is like life-altering injuries. Like, you have to be very careful with a guy's brain. And that was a scary scene for everyone on the field. So prayers up. He's all right, but definitely some questions that need to be asked.
Jason, so last week when it happened initially, my initial overreaction instant tweet was, I have faith that the NFL protocols are good enough and strong enough that this, if they say it's not a concussion, it's not a concussion. But then after you think about it, and then you see last night and how everything went down, something's fishy going on there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we live in a city where we had a star player's career ended by concussions. Eric Lindros. I mean, the guy was like a superstar, bona fide, best in the game at the time, and concussions ruined his career. And you hate to see it, but yes, I mean, Tua is it. We've talked about the comparisons with him and Jalen, how they're both kind of on the same track. They both got weapons, and everyone's excited about Tua. Listen, I'm not a Dolphins fan, but I'm happy for my friend. He is a Dolphins fan. And I feel bad watching this kind of stuff. I mean, it's sad. I mean, it's a scary situation. And, yeah, the NFL definitely should be, stepping in here. Now, will they? Who knows? I mean, I hope so. And this is where it's frustrating.
The NFL is the one that might be are the Dolphins in the wrong? Like, if this comes out that, there was, something fishy last Sunday in diagnosing the concussion and they let him out there, is this on the NFL because they're the ones that hired that third party, independent group to evaluate every head injury, or is this on the Dolphins? And then I've also seen tweets, guys, of maybe this is partially on Tua as well, because if Tua had a head injury, he told them to look at the back and clear him. So could some of it actually be blamed on Tua himself? Trying to see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I personally feel, I get, like, if he's hand up, he should probably say something if he's hurt. But I'm in the position of, like, there has to be an infrastructure that, like, protects players from hurting themselves. Like, at the end of the day, these guys are competitors that want to play, get on the field. And for this kind of stuff, like, I think it's on the team to have some sort of process in play to make sure that's okay, especially when dealing with concussions. And I know it's not the head, but another guy that it reminded me of was RG3. And we saw like the beginning of his career when he looked like such a stud and looked like a star and some really impressive stuff when him and Luck coming out of college and just having the year he had to go through those knee injuries. And now we see him like in the broadcast booth doing his thing. So it's like for football players specifically and every sport, it's like your career can alter so quickly. And for Tua, a guy that's still incredibly young, looks like on the right path to be playing around with this is brutal to me.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, I don't know if you guys saw it. This was years ago. Jim McMahon, obviously the Bears quarterback from the 80s. They did a special on him on ESPN. It was not the 30 for 30, the other show that they do interviews with. And in it, they were interviewing him about head injuries and concussions. And literally in the middle of the interview, while the cameras were rolling, he forgot what was going on. He's like, who are you? What's going on here? Because of the head injuries. He said in this interview, he'll be like, oh, the mailman just came. He'll go to walk down his driveway to get the mail. And when he gets down to the end of the driveway, he gets lost and forgets where he is. And you would think this league and sports in general would have come further at this point.
Yeah.
But then here we are again. And look, let's just be honest. I mean, the Dolphins are an organization that now has got a lot of question marks between Brian Flores and that whole situation, the paying for tanking, which whatever, the league has ruled in that. You know, they've already been fined for some other issues. And now you have this Tua situation. And last night, Mike McDaniel, their head coach, just flat out came out and said, no, he did not have a concussion. So now he's taken the back of the organization. If this comes out that it was some kind of a cover-up, he's gone and out of a job now. You would think the league would have progressed a little bit more by now, Jason.
Well, yeah, and listen, we're talking about the Dolphin side of things. Well, what about the punishment for these hits? That's where another problem is to me.
Was the hit really that vicious? Like, it wasn't an illegal hit, really, from the way I saw it. He kind of pulled him down. Maybe he snapped him down a little bit.
I think there should be more. Listen, we talk about protecting the quarterback, and I get it when quarterbacks, whatever. If they're out of the pocket, they become a run. Right. I get that whole thing, but going to any motion towards somebody's head to me is vicious, regardless if it's illegal or not. That's where I think they need to look at where do you draw the line? Because you have to set the bar high as far as punishment, or else it's going to continue to happen. People know that they can hit somebody and they get a game suspension or they get fined $100,000. Do you think they give a shit? A guy making $7 million a year if he gets fined $100,000? No, he doesn't care.
Yeah, I agree with Freddie here. I don't think it was a vicious hit last night specifically. It was a lot of the momentum, but
and that's fine. At least
it wasn't maliciously. It wasn't like, what was the Bengals player, the linebacker for the last couple of years at
Vontaze.
Yeah. He was constantly with malicious intent in his hitting of quarterbacks and stuff like that. I don't think it was any meant to hurt the guy kind of hit last night.
And that's fine, but it's still if the head was hit.
The head was. I guess you haven't seen. The head was not hit. He was grabbed around the waist and thrown down. He might have been thrown a little forcefully, but
so
his head bounced off the carpet. I saw somebody tweet. I didn't even realize it. I mean, they might have AstroTurf there in Cincinnati. I mean, shouldn't we know better to not have AstroTurf? I still got my vet AstroTurf back here. I can tell you, it's not a comfy piece of thing. Sean, final thoughts on it. I mean, what's going to happen here with the Dolphins?
Yeah, I saw the NFLPA tweeted out a thing about their investigation is ongoing, that kind of thing. I think it also should be like recognized concussions are such a weird thing. Like he might have shown no symptoms game time, and then like later that night, Sunday, could have started having some issues. Like there's a lot that can't be ruled out, and they need to like start the bottom. I'm not surprised to see like the coach pretty much and the whole Dolphins organization has to like stick to the story and what they believe happened with it at this point. So now it's kind of like we'll see how it plays out, but definitely sad, hate every part of it, and I don't know. I'm curious to see what comes of this because I feel like there has to be something.
Yeah, I mean, if this comes out, guys, that there was any kind of cover-up from the third party, from two of the Dolphins, whatever the situation, however it plays out, could we see a scenario where the Dolphins, I mean, not just the head coach of the Dolphins, but the GM, the owner, any of these guys are not just suspend it. Like, can we see a scenario where the owner of the Dolphins is held liable and, he's forced to sell the team? Like, I know that's very drastic, but, we've seen crazier things. The NFL, if this comes out that it's a cover-up of any kind, the NFL has to make a really bold, major statement. Suspending an owner for a year and fining them $1 million, that's not really a statement. Is there a scenario where something like that can happen, guys?
It's also like I'm going to be interested to see where the blame would exactly fall, because it's like there's the questions about like the process of him getting clear. There's the questions about the doctors that did it. There's a lot of like a lot of just like where exactly was the miscommunication or mislabeling, if there was one. So I think there's going to be a lot that will be evaluated. And like for the owner specifically, like he obviously is the face and the guy that takes it, but like I guarantee he didn't play much of a role in like making the decision if he played or not. So it's going to be weird to me where exactly the responsibility on this falls. And I think like the NFL is going to play a part in reevaluating their process and making sure stuff like this isn't possible too.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron checking in, and Aaron's Jason's friend. That's the Dolphins fan. Independent doctors cleared him, but again, the Peyton Manning situation here, where you could dumb down the baseline test just to pass it. Maybe these independent doctors, maybe they're just. I don't know how to solve the problem, how to fix the problem. Jason.
I mean, listen, I don't think you can blame Tua.
Yeah, no.
If
you have to protect the players from themselves.
You have to understand that a player is going to want to play regardless. I mean, some of these guys are very tough. And at the end of the day, if you're the star quarterback, the franchise quarterback, you're going to want to play. So it's not Tua's fault. It definitely has to come from – there's got to be somebody held accountable. And that, to me, would be the team. I mean, if it's not the doctors, if it was independent doctors, then I think the team should still err on the side of caution when it comes to these things. Like,
can I throw a scenario at you guys here? What if he traveled, Sean? You said back with the team last night. What if he Saturday or Sunday or Monday he clears concussion protocol, and you're the Dolphins organization? Are you letting him play next week?
I don't know.
It's a tough situation. He clears the protocol, and you put him back out there. I saw a tweet from Jake from Talking 215. He had a major head injury, and it's something that they put him in like a bubble for months, to away from screen time, away from any physical contact, to make sure his head healed properly. Potentially 2 concussions in 4 days. I don't care if he clears protocol. Do you throw him out there?
I just can't see a world where that happens, to be honest. I think it's like they're going to be overcautious with this, and I don't even see a decision being made until kind of investigation is finalized on this. Like they've got some clear questions to answer and see how that like sums up before they actually like see if he can even play. So I can't see him playing next week. I prayers up that he is all good in general, and I don't know. I can't see a world where he suits up for the Dolphins next week.
Yeah, it just popped into my head, just the thought that, hey, if this is all legit, like the Dolphins have said, who's to say he doesn't clear it again? I mean, there's no scenario where you can let the guy, do that. But, just a thought popped in. All right, so real quick, I'm going to wrap this up here, Sean, with you, and then we'll finish the show, Jason, in a minute. Sean Barnard, Sean_Barnard1, the I just Pick Swap podcast, heavy on sports. What do you got going on right now? Tell everybody where they could find you, where they could find the Pick Swap pod, and all your writings that you're doing right now.
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Sean_Barnard1. You can check out my written work on Heavy and Yardbarker, Sixers content on Heavy.com. Had a cool article on B-Ball Paul playing next to Embiid that just dropped this morning, so you can check that out. And then check out Pick Swap Media for my podcast, a couple others popping out of there, but got that on the YouTube channel and everything else. So appreciate you guys for having me on, and yeah, it was good chatting up.
Eagles win Sunday?
Yeah, I think so for sure.
All right. Again, thank you to Sean for joining us this morning. We'll definitely have Sean on again. He actually is one of the few that doesn't mind waking up early to come on the morning show.
That's all right. I appreciate you guys for having me, and we'll talk with you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Sean.
See you.
All right. That was Sean Barnard, Pick Swap Pod, heavy on sports. Jason, real quick, final thoughts on Tua. Will he play next? Will he play the rest of this year at this point? Or should the league just be careful with a guy like him, because you don't want this to become a bigger problem down the line for the guy, the person, the guy.
No, I think he'll play for the year. I think what you can do is you could have multiple outlets test him, for the concussion. I think you got to be more cautious, but does he play? Does he play Sunday? I don't think so. I think they give him a week off at least. Listen, at the end of the day, it is a serious issue, concussions. We talked about it. But we also know how many players have had concussions and don't even, don't baseline test for it, and they still had the concussion. Think about guys that we've talked about later in their careers where their careers were ended, and then later in life,
Look, I'll throw it this way.
We had 7 guys from the Eagles that Buddy Ryan era that are now gone, and I believe 6 of those 7, after they did brain studies, have shown CTE. So listen, concussions are almost. I hate to say it, but it's like a part of the NFL. Like it's not gonna. You're not gonna escape it.
Right. It's kind of similar to wrestling. The concussions in the wrestling business is the same situation. Wrestlers like someone like Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan, whatever you know him as. I think it was 3 years he was held out of a wrestling ring till his brain fully healed from some of the hits he took. But I look at Carson Wentz. That concussion he took from what was the Seahawks defensive end that hit him in the back of the head. Why can't I think of his name? Who gave him the concussion? You know what I'm talking about. That was in 2000. Carson Wentz is still not physically the same person since that injury. You can still see how scared he is to take a hit because of what that did to him.
So when I was I believe I was 22 or 23. I can't remember how old I was, but I got a concussion. Okay. I hit my head. And then I ended up having another time where I kind of tripped down the stairs and I hit my head again. And I had a worse concussion. Concussions are they don't it's almost like, I don't know how to explain it, but it gets worse. It doesn't ever really fully heal.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And I didn't play a sport and I had 2 concussions. So imagine playing a sport where you're getting hit every single game, regardless if it's a legal hit or a non-malicious hit, you're still being hit. And when I had
a server that worked for me many moons ago. He had done a little boxing and MMA on the side before I had known him, and he had a lot of concussions. And I didn't know about it. He hadn't told me at this point. And I just I forget the exact situation, but he just got bumped slightly in the shoulder, and he didn't see it coming at work, and his head just jerked a little bit.
I got it.
And literally like that, he literally 40-something-year-old guy. He had to sit down. He got super dizzy. We had to send him to the hospital just because the slightest of motion and bumping of him just set him off. And it's something he's like, dude, I deal with this for the rest of my life. That a few concussions when I was in my 20s, now in my 40s, my life is completely different because of it.
Yeah, and like I said, so I don't know what you do. If you're asking what do we do moving forward, they obviously have tried to be better as far as player safety, but I think, this kind of maybe is it kind of a milestone moment, so to speak, where maybe the NFL needs to take a step back and say, maybe we're not as far ahead as we thought we were.
Right.
We need to look at how teams handle this and what we can what guidelines we can put in there to kind of prevent this from happening again. Because that's
what really blows my mind, Jason? What really blows my mind is that we are so advanced as people. We could build all these smart cars, planes. We could go to the moon. We could do all these things. But yet we can't build a helmet that protects these guys' heads. You're telling me we can't find a way to protect these athletes' heads a little bit better? There's got to be someone smarter than me out there that can design a better helmet. I know they've modified it over the years and made it better, so to speak, but there's got to be someone smart enough out there that could devise one that, eliminates it even more. You would think about that,
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Simple. All right, so we got 10 minutes left in the show. We got to talk Eagles. Got to talk Eagles, Jaguars. Final thoughts, final predictions, final keys to victory, Jason. The Tua situation is something that we're going to – yeah. But still, Freddie, I still think two Eagles it was Mailata and somebody else got concussions, even with the extra padded helmets, in training camp. So that's not necessarily the answer either. Eagles, Jaguars, Jason, the Doug Pederson come-home game. I want give me your final thoughts, your game theory on how it's going to play out, how the homecoming for Doug Pederson's going to go, and what's going to have to happen for the Eagles not to let Doug Pederson be celebrating a victory on Sunday afternoon.
Well, I mean, I kind of hinted at it last show. I even though there's a homecoming effect and Doug's going to have that team ramped up, I just don't see the Jaguars beating the Eagles right now. I see the Eagles being on a continual rise right now. They're just getting better each week that they played. I mean, obviously, week one, they came out, they gave up a lot of points to the Lions. But I think we're all able to, anybody that watches football is able to realize that the Lions are better than they were advertised at. I'm not saying the Lions are, a great team, but they're a better team than a lot of people expected. They had weapons. They, obviously Jared Goff's playing well. So, okay, we beat the Lions. Then we come out and we smack the Vikings, who I had as originally on the schedule as a loss. I had the Vikings game as a loss. So I see how they played against the Vikings. And then last week, the dominance over the Washington Commanders. I always forget what they're called.
You're like, you got to think for a second what their name is.
But yeah, so I just see this team getting better each week, and I think that trend's going to continue. I do think Doug will get a nice homecoming as far as I think the fans, for the most part. I'm sure there's going to be some of your assholes that boo, but I think for the most part, he'll get a welcome, a good welcome home. I think the game is going to be one of those games where it's not a shootout, but I do think there's going to be some points because I think the Jaguars, I don't want to take the Jaguars offense lightly because they do have some pieces there. And I don't know, are we going score predictions? I'm going to
you can give your score prediction because then I'm going to give you some of my thoughts and then I'll roll out with my prediction after that.
I think we saw the Eagles kind of use it. They've had different ways that they've won. Mm-hmm. Week one, obviously, they did rely a lot on the run, and obviously Jalen Hurts ran the ball a lot. He had 17 rushes in that game. You didn't see the huge passing numbers from Hurts in that particular game. Obviously, it was A.J. Brown was the hot hand, had 10 for 10 or 10 for 150 or whatever it was. Game two, they come out and they kind of elevated the passing game. Obviously, but they mixed the balance of run. Now, last game, I would say it's not that they didn't run the ball, but they didn't focus on the run. Mm-hmm. I think in this kind of game, I think you want to come out and establish the run, and I think they're going to do that. I don't think they're not going to pass, but I think they're going to try to establish the run because I think that's their main focus in every game, and it should be because that's their strength.
Yeah. So that's interesting because that's kind of one of my big things too. It's the Eagles run versus the Jags number one ranked rush defense, and the Jags running against the Eagles would be the number one run defense if it wasn't for week one against Detroit. So you've got two really great run defenses going up against two teams that run the ball very well. So what's going to give? Whose team is going to stop the other's rushing attack? You can't forget, Jason. I mean, it is going to rain on Sunday as well. I don't know if it'll be heavy rain or not, but it is going to be a wet field, and it's going to be a field where running the ball is really going to set up your team. I look at it this way. Obviously, I think the Jags have only given up 55 yards a game is what they're averaging this year, rush defense-wise. The Eagles, in the last 2 weeks, have only given up 55 combined yards rushing. And I want to give you one stat here. Week one, 32%. Week two, 36%. Week three, 37%. Do you know what that means?
No.
That's the percentage of snaps Jordan Davis They've been increasing every single week, 32, 36, 37. And guess what? Our rush defense has gotten better every single week as his snap count goes up. If Jordan Davis is around that 37, 38% this week, I could see the Eagles being able to shut down James Robinson this week.
So what you're telling me is Jonathan Gannon actually listened. And he's
Jonathan
sticking to his
Gannon got put up against a wall after week 1 and realized it's time to, in the words of Zombieland, it's time to nut up or shut up. And all of a sudden, this defense is much better after week 1.
So maybe it did work. Maybe he learned from his mistakes. And we've talked about this team adapting and adjusting. And we talked about the fact that Jonathan Gannon struggles with making adjustments. Well, I think this is a clear adjustment. So that's a win.
So one other thing that I do worry about a little bit, well, not worry about, I just want to say is, like, obviously we've been very effective the last 2 weeks at getting after the quarterback. Sacks have been rolling in, stuff like that. Trevor Lawrence, I forget now, I didn't write it down. I saw it this morning that Trevor Lawrence is the 5th or 6th quickest quarterback at getting rid of the football, where Kirk Cousins and Carson Wentz hold onto the football longer than anybody else in the NFL. So this week, you're not going to see 8 sacks of Trevor Lawrence. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on our cornerbacks if the weather's good enough to stop Christian Kirk, to stop Zay Jones, to stop Evan Ingram. I forget who their third wide receiver is at this point, but it's going to be on Marvin Jones. It's going to be on Darius Slay, James Bradbury, and Avonte Maddox, who are probably the best trio, one of the best trios in the NFL, to really have big games this week.
Yeah, and listen, at the end of the day, I'm confident in our corners. I think Slay has shown, and Bradbury both, they've shown an ability in times where they've had to cover. They've done well. I mean, look at the success in game 2 that Slay had against Justin Jefferson, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. I'm confident in our corners. I agree with you. It will be not a concern, but a question of whether we can kind of wreak havoc with our pass rush. Obviously, we're not getting 8 sacks. I mean, we got 8 sacks because our defense played well, but we also have to say it was because Carson Wentz is horrible at getting the ball out. I mean, Carson Wentz, one of the worst I've ever seen.
Carson Wentz is now in the Eli Manning category. I don't know, 1 or 2 of those sacks, like, he was just literally touched on the hip, and he just crumbled down because he didn't want to take the hit. So, like, he's that guy that doesn't just feel the pressure. Like, he feels the pressure, and he just goes down to be safe. And that comes back to that concussion conversation, where I still don't think he's fully recovered mentally on what happened to him then. So, final score prediction, Jason, how is it going to play out, and will the Eagles win?
Well, I keep being proven wrong because I keep taking the over. But I'm going to keep doing the scores that I keep saying, and maybe once I'll hit on it.
Once out of 17 weeks, it'll hit?
I'm going to say 28-17 Eagles. I don't think it's going to be I think 9 points, obviously is not a blowout.
Right.
It's going to be fairly close, but I think that late touchdown, the 17, I think that'll be scored at the end of the game. Like, we'll kind of be in prevent defense. So we're going to be up 28 to 10.
Okay.
And then
I can see that. That's pretty close to what I'm thinking. I always have multiple scores written down. Then as we talk it out, I figure it out.
Yeah, the same.
I don't think this Jaguars team is a bad team, but the talent level on the Eagles compared to the talent level on the Jaguars, in my opinion, is night and day. This Jaguars team is riding high. The emotional feeling after beating the Chargers last week, I think they kind of a letdown. There's a lot of emotion going on with Doug Pederson this week. The Eagles are just a more talented team. I'm going to go with the lowest of my 3 predictions that I had written down as my prediction. I'm going 24-10 as the score. Because I think the way I was going to say 27-17. That was the other one I was literally 1 point off of you. I was going to go 27-17. I'm just thinking that if the weather's bad, it's going to be a slightly lower scoring game. I just think that we're going to be able to look. I said it before. The Jags have 3 number 2 and 3 wide receivers. They have, a young quarterback that's still trying to figure it out. And their defense, they have good players, but they don't have a lot of super talented and experienced players. So they're still growing. And that 2016 to 2022 Eagles-Jaguars comparison is what's in my head. And it was week 4 when the Eagles came down to earth in 2016. It's week 4 again. This is when the Jaguars come back down to earth a little bit. They have literally gone the last 2 weeks and given up a combined 10 points to Jaguars. They're not going to be that good for that long. So that's where the Eagles come in this week. They dominate. Maybe it's 24-3. Maybe it's 24-0 again. Maybe they go up 24-0 in the first half for a third week in a row. I hope not, because I don't want to see another second half with no score. But it's going to take the Jaguars coming back to even get close in this game. So 24-10 Eagles. You've got 27-17 Eagles. Still the only undefeated team.
28-17.
28-17. I'm looking at my score. Sorry. 28-17 for you. 24-10 me. The only 4-0 team in the NFL after week 4.
Yeah, I think once again, I think Hurts will be the player of the game. I think he'll have 3 passing touchdowns, and I think he goes for a rushing one this week.
Yeah, I'm going the other way. I think this is a week where he gets some rushing touchdowns, or like week 1 where we have all the running backs with touchdowns. I think this will be a running attack with a lot of short passes because of the weather that's going to be playing a factor in the game.
Yeah, I'm not worried. See, I think rain is overrated. I think people still pass.
It's probably, yeah, I agree. And we have the wide receivers that we could do bubble screens and short little slants to A.J. Brown and stuff like that. I just don't expect a 300-yard passing game from Jalen.
Oh, I don't think 300 yards, but I think 3 passing touchdowns. I think 220 passing and 3 touchdowns, and then a rushing touchdown and another 50 yards rushing.
Okay. All right. We'll see how that plays out. Trending in the AM right here, DSM Media. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, drop your comments, even if it's on replay, even if you just say you hate us and we're awful. It helps our algorithm. So just go ahead and drop those comments in the comment section. We greatly appreciate it. We'll be back next week. We'll see what happens with the Eagles. We'll have so much to continue talking about. Again, a special shout out to Sean Barnard for coming on this morning, talking Sixers, talking a little Tua with us. Greatly appreciate his time. That's my main man, Jason Voorhees at Mustang3651. I am Phil Stiefel at Beard and Knowledge. Y'all have a great weekend, and go Birds.
Go Birds.